My name is Zara Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. 3 days before my wedding, I should have been selecting champagne and confirming flower deliveries. Instead, my wealthy future mother-in-law thrust a stack of legal papers into my hands. Her cold smile said everything. "Sign this," she commanded, her voice cutting like ice. "Or there's no wedding." Her family circled around her like predators, watching the poor girl, waiting for me to crumble. They had no clue I had $16 million in investment accounts. And they definitely didn't know I had a lawyer on speed dial who was about to erase those arrogant smirks from their faces forever. Before I reveal what was in that insulting document and how I struck back, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever dealt with entitled in-laws who looked down on you and completely underestimated what you're capable of, smash that like button and subscribe. Believe me, you'll want to see how this story ends. Everything exploded 3 days before the ceremony. I was standing in the Montgomery family library, a room so grand it felt like a museum exhibit. Rich walnut paneling covered the walls, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes nobody had probably ever opened, and a desk that could have belonged in the White House. The air carried the scent of old wealth and expensive furniture. Wax. I'd been called from my downtown Boston apartment under the pretense of a final catering consultation. A ridiculous excuse, but I showed up wanting to be the accommodating, flexible daughter-in-law. My future mother-in-law, Victoria Montgomery, didn't even gesture for me to sit. At 59, she was an imposing woman, always dressed flawlessly, her silver hair styled perfectly, her jewelry minimal but absurdly expensive. She was the queen of this prominent Boston family, and she never let anyone forget it. She was scrolling through her phone when I entered, not even glancing up. She simply slid a thick, spiral-bound document across the polished desktop. It landed with a dull, heavy sound. "Sign it," she said flatly. 2 words. Her tone was bored, indifferent, as if she were asking a servant to fetch something. I blinked, bewildered. "I'm sorry, Victoria. What exactly is this?" That's when Richard Sterling spoke up. Richard was Ethan's older brother-in-law, married to his sister Madison. He's 39, the family's personal attorney, and the only white man in the room. He always wore that overly friendly campaign smile that never touched his eyes. "Zara, it's merely a formality," he said, emerging from the shadows near the bookshelves. He was already in his lawyer costume, crisp suit and a patronizing attitude. "A standard prenuptial agreement." I froze. A prenup. Ethan and I had never discussed a prenup. Richard let out a small, condescending chuckle. He picked up the document and tapped it against his palm. "Well, the family is discussing it now." He leaned closer, his smile tightening. His voice dropped to a sharp, cruel whisper, meant only for me. "Look, Zara, sign this, or the wedding is off. It really is that simple. Your choice." My breath caught. The wedding is off. Those words echoed in the massive room. I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 days. Only 3. My mother and aunts were flying in from South Carolina tomorrow. The venue was paid for. The flowers were ordered. My dress, a gorgeous custom creation, was hanging in my closet. I thought of the hundreds of guests, all the deposits, the humiliation. This wasn't a request. This was an execution. I looked from Richard's smug, pale face to Victoria's cold, emotionless expression. They had orchestrated this. This was an ambush, and they were savoring every second of it. I was still reeling from Richard's ultimatum when another voice chimed in, this one sharp and dripping with false sweetness. It was Madison, Ethan's older sister. At 36, Madison considered herself the princess of the Montgomery family. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a malicious little smile playing on her lips. "Oh, Zara, don't look so devastated," she giggled, a sound like shattering glass. "It's not like this is a surprise." She pushed off the doorframe and moved closer, looking me up and down as if I were something unpleasant she'd discovered. "We all know where you come from. This is simply to protect the family's assets. She paused dramatically, her eyes gleaming with malice. After all, you don't really have anything to lose, do you? Her words struck a nerve, and just like that, I was transported back to my first Thanksgiving with them 2 years ago. I remembered standing in their massive, professional-grade kitchen, trying to help Victoria, who wouldn't let me touch anything. She'd asked what I did for a living. I told her I was a freelance X or UE designer. I'll never forget the look she gave me. She'd smiled, a tight, dismissive smile. "Oh, a computer artist," she'd said, her tone suggesting. I'd just told her I made friendship bracelets. How charming. She turned back to her gravy, and that was that. They never asked about it again. They never asked about my clients or the wellness app I was building with my partners from MIT. All they ever saw was the 9-year-old Honda Civic I drove when I visited them. They never saw the loft I actually owned in downtown Boston, the one I'd pretended I was just renting. I had kept my success private. I wanted them to like me, Zara, the person, not my bank account. What a fool I'd been. My eyes dropped back to the document Richard had thrown on the desk. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was pure rage. I forced myself to flip past the signature page to actually read the terms. What I saw made my stomach clench. It was worse than I could have imagined. This wasn't a standard prenup. This was a trap. It wasn't just about protecting their existing assets. Clause 4A stated that I would waive all rights to any and all assets, property, or income acquired during the marriage, regardless of who earned it. That meant my company, my investments, everything I was building. They were trying to claim it all. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Section 6, the infidelity and fault clause. It was written so vaguely that fault could mean anything from leaving my shoes in the hallway to causing emotional distress. And if I was deemed at fault for a divorce, I would be legally required to reimburse the Montgomery family for the full itemized cost of the wedding. They even specified the catering and floral budget, totaling over $320,000, and as the final sickening insult, I would have to return the engagement ring or pay them its appraised value of $80,000. They weren't just protecting their money. They were setting me up to be their indentured servant. They were telling me I was worthless, that my only value was as decoration, and that I should be grateful to pay for the privilege of marrying into their family. I closed the document slowly. The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock in the hallway. I looked up, meeting Victoria's icy stare. "Where is Ethan?" I asked. My voice came out stronger than I expected, level and sharp. I needed to see my fiancé. I needed to see the expression on his face when he saw this garbage. Richard and Madison glanced at Victoria. She was the one in control. Victoria sighed, an exaggerated bored sound, and finally looked up from her phone. She looked at me, but it felt like she was looking through me. "Ethan is busy with men's business," she said dismissively. "He's at the country club with his father, finalizing arrangements with the donors for the charity auction." Her message was crystal clear. He was busy with important things. I was not. "This is our domain, Zara," she continued, waving a perfectly manicured hand at the prenup. "Don't waste any more of our time. Just sign it so we can all move forward with our day. Waste our time." That phrase echoed in my head. They thought my time was worthless, that my signature was inevitable, that my life was just a footnote in their grand narrative. I looked at the three of them, Richard with his shark-like smile, Madison bored and entitled, and Victoria, the puppet master, already back to glancing at her phone. The humiliation that had been burning in my chest moments ago suddenly cooled. It crystallized into something hard, cold, and razor-sharp. It was pure, icy fury. I took a slow, deep breath, pulling my shoulders back. My hands were perfectly steady. Now, I met Victoria's gaze until she was forced to look up, an annoyed expression on her face. "This contract," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. I placed my hand flat on the document. "Will never be signed," and for a second, there was no reaction. It was as if their brains couldn't process the words. Madison was the first to break. She let out a short, surprised laugh, but it died in her throat. What did you just say? Richard's smile vanished, replaced by a deep frown. He looked genuinely confused. Zara, I don't think you understand. This isn't a negotiation. You don't have a choice. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I don't think, I said, looking directly at him. I know. Their eyes were all on me now, wary. I unlocked my phone and hit a number on my favorites list. It rang once. A crisp, professional voice answered. Amanda Chen speaking. Hi, Amanda, I said, my voice light and conversational. It's Sarah. I'm over at the Montgomery estate. I watched Richard's face as I spoke. Yes, they just gave me that draft we discussed. It looks like a first-year law student wrote it. Richard's face went from confused to ashen. He recognized that name. In the Boston legal world, everyone knew that name. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the desk next to their insulting contract. Amanda, I have Richard Sterling in the room with me, the family's counsel. Mr. Sterling. Amanda's voice boomed from the phone, sharp and commanding. I am Amanda Chen from Chen and Associates. I am Zara Mitchell's personal counsel. I trust you'll be sending an unredacted copy of that document to my office immediately. I looked at Richard. He was frozen. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. My lawyer, I said, clarifying for the room, specializes in multi-million-dollar corporate acquisitions. She'll be reviewing this little formality of yours. I smiled, feeling the power shift in the room like a physical force. She will contact you in 1 hour with our revisions. I looked over at Victoria. Her perfectly manicured hand was gripping the arm of her chair. Her smug expression had completely frozen. Richard's jaw was slack. They had ambushed the wrong woman. They thought they were cornering a poor, desperate girl. They never in a million years expected that the computer artist had a shark of her own on retainer. I left the Montgomery mansion without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked out, got into my Honda, and drove. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles were white. The entire 25-minute drive from their Beacon Hill fortress to my loft in downtown Boston, Victoria's words echoed in my head. Ethan is busy with men's business. While his mother, his sister, and his brother-in-law tried to legally chain me to a life of servitude, I parked in my designated spot in the secure garage, a spot I owned. I took the private elevator up to my floor, an elevator that opened directly into my home. The doors slid open to my living room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view of the Boston skyline. This was my sanctuary. This was what I had built, and he was here. Ethan was standing by the kitchen island, nervously running his hands through his hair. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes wide and full of guilt. He was 34, handsome and charismatic when he wanted to be, but right now he just looked like a scared little boy. Zara, you're back. I was getting worried. My mom said you left. He started. I didn't say hello. I walked straight past him, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. I took the insulting document from my purse and threw it onto my white marble countertop. It landed with a loud final slap. Explain this, Ethan. He flinched. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the document like it was a venomous snake. Baby, I was going to tell you. I was. It's just Mom and Dad. They said it was just a safeguard. A safeguard for what? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You know how they are, he pleaded, finally, looking at me, his eyes desperate. They're old-fashioned. They're just trying to protect the family, I repeated, and the words tasted like acid. Or protect the family's money from me. It all clicked into place. This wasn't the first time. How many dinners had I sat through where they made subtle digs at my background? How many times had Ethan said, just ignore them, babe, or that's just how Mom is? He was the vice president of Montgomery Properties Group, but I knew that was just a title his father had given him. A fancy office and a 6-figure salary to keep him in line. I truly believed he loved me, but in that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. He loved me, but he was terrified of his family, and he feared them far more than he respected me. My voice dropped, losing all its warmth. So you knew. You knew? They thought I was a gold digger. You knew they were planning this. And you let them. You let them ambush me 3 days before our wedding and treat me like garbage. No, it wasn't like that, he insisted, taking a step toward me. I took a step back. Did you even read this, Ethan? I jabbed a finger at the document. Did you read the part where I have to waive all rights to any money I earn? Or did you just skim to the good part, section 6, the part that says if I'm at fault, whatever that means, I have to pay them back for the entire wedding? The part that says I have to give back my ring? Ethan looked horrified, but also cornered. Zara, come on. Don't make this a huge deal. He lunged forward and tried to grab my hands, to pull me into a hug, to make it all disappear. It's just paper. It doesn't mean anything. I love you. We love each other. Let's just sign it and everything will be fine. We can just forget about it. I pulled my hands away from him as if his touch was poison. I looked at this man I was supposed to marry in 3 days. This man who was asking me to sign my dignity away just so he could avoid a difficult conversation with his parents. No, Ethan, I said, and my voice was so cold it startled even me. You won't sign it, and neither will I. Ethan stared at me, his face a mask of confusion and panic. Zara, what are you talking about? Not sign it? We have to the wedding. Everything get out, Ethan, I said, my voice flat. I need to make a call. He just stood there, speechless, as I walked past him into my home office and shut the glass door. I didn't bother to see if he left the apartment. I didn't care. My priority was no longer his feelings. It was my survival. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up a secure video link. A second later, a face I trusted completely filled the screen. Amanda Chen. At 41, Amanda was one of the most formidable corporate lawyers in Boston. She was sharp, always dressed in a power suit even for a video call, and she didn't suffer fools. Zara, she said, her voice warm but all business. You look like you've seen a ghost. Let me guess. They did it, I confirmed. I held up the thick document. Want to see it? Send it to my secure email now, she commanded. I scanned and sent the entire document. I watched her screen as she read. She was silent for the first 2 pages, her expression grim. Then, as she got to section 4 and section 6, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a sharp, dangerous sound. Zara, this isn't just insulting, she said, looking back at me. This is borderline malpractice. Richard Sterling must be either incredibly stupid, or he thinks you are. She leaned into her camera. He's trying to intimidate you. He's betting you're a terrified girl with no resources who will just roll over. He never expected you'd have counsel, especially not me. He looked like he was going to be sick when I mentioned your name, I said, feeling the first real spark of control return. As he should, Amanda said. So, what's the strategy? We can kill this wedding and sue them for the deposits based on this ambush and the unconscionable terms. We can make a lot of noise. I shook my head. The rage inside me was still there, but it was clearer now. It wasn't just about escaping. It was about justice. No, I said. I don't want to just cancel the wedding. Not yet. They ambushed me. They tried to humiliate me. They think I'm nothing. I looked directly at Amanda. I want to teach them a lesson. Amanda's professional mask cracked into a wide, predatory grin. Oh, I like that. I like that very much. She tapped her pen on her desk. All right, lesson it is. Send me your latest financials. And I mean the latest. The ones from last week. The ones that show the finalized wire transfer for my Lumina stock buyout. I asked. The full $16 million one. Yes, she said. That one. I nodded, pulling up the file. For 7 years, I had poured my blood and sweat into an app I co-founded focused on mental and physical wellness for Black women. We had just been partially acquired by a major Silicon Valley firm. The payout had finalized 8 days ago. I had kept it quiet, even from Ethan, not to be deceptive, but because I wanted to be sure he loved me for me. I wanted his family to accept me. I didn't want to be Zara the tech millionaire. I just wanted to be Zara. What a joke. All they saw was a poor girl from South Carolina. I've sent it, I said. Good, Amanda said, her eyes already scanning the numbers. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to refuse this prenup. That's what they expect. We're going to rewrite it. She started typing furiously. We're going to draft an addendum, a list of our own terms, and we're going to send it back to Mr. Sterling tonight. We're going to send him an addendum so brutal, so ironclad, it's going to make him wish he'd stayed in real estate law. As she was mapping out the strategy, she suddenly paused. She had a strange look on her face. Wait a minute, she said, more to herself than to me. Montgomery Properties Group? What about them? I asked. I heard something last week, she said, pulling up another window on her screen. From a client of mine, a major construction materials supplier. She scanned the screen. Ah, here it is. Your future in-laws are in trouble, Zara. Deep trouble. They're over 100 days late on payments to 4 of their biggest vendors. She looked up at me. And Richard Sterling? That's even juicier. His little boutique law firm, they're being sued. A massive malpractice suit from a former client. Rumor is he's about to be disbarred and lose everything. I just sat there, stunned. Trouble? But they seem so wealthy. The house, the cars, the auction. Amanda let out that dangerous laugh again. Paper rich and cash rich are two very different things, baby. All that flash, it's a house of cards. They're not just trying to protect their assets. She leaned in, her eyes glinting. They're protecting a sinking ship. This just got a whole lot more interesting. She closed the files. Get some rest, Zara. I'll have the draft of our addendum by morning. And I'll have my investigators dig up everything there is to know about the Montgomery family's finances before the sun sets tomorrow. The call ended. I sat in the silence of my office, the city lights twinkling outside. Ethan was gone. The apartment was empty. And I finally understood. The prenup wasn't just an act of arrogance. It was an act of pure, cold desperation. And they had just shown their entire hand to the last person they ever should have. The next morning, the air was sharp and cold. It was 2 days before the wedding. I met Amanda at a coffee shop half a mile from Richard Sterling's office. She handed me a freshly printed document, our addendum, and a separate file folder. This, she said, tapping the folder, is the financial report my investigator compiled overnight. It's bad, Zara. Worse than I imagined. Read it. I'm getting us coffee. You need to know exactly who you're dealing with. I opened the folder as she walked away. She was right. It was a catastrophe. Montgomery Properties Group wasn't just behind on payments. They were leveraged to the breaking point. They had taken out 4 high-interest bridge loans in the last 7 months, clearly just to make payroll and keep the lights on. The charity auctions, the expensive vehicles. It was all theater. The report showed they were at least $2.3 million in the red with vendors. And the first of those high-interest loans was due in 35 days. If they defaulted, it would trigger a domino effect that would obliterate them and Richard Sterling. His malpractice suit was public record. A client was suing him for $850,000, claiming he had misappropriated trust funds. He was finished. This was why they were so desperate. This was why they needed this wedding to happen. They needed the illusion of stability. Amanda returned and set a coffee in front of me. See, she said, they weren't just insulting you. They were trying to secure a financial lifeline. They figured if they could bully you into signing away your rights, they could maybe even use your future income as collateral once you were married. They see you as a walking, talking ATM they could trap. I closed the folder, the cold fury from yesterday returning. Let's go, I said. It's time to end this. We walked into Richard Sterling's office at 10:15 a.m. sharp. His law firm was in a glass tower, but the reception area felt dated. The leather on the chairs was cracked, and the magazines were 8 months old. Clear signs of cash flow problems. we were shown into a conference room. Richard was already there, looking jittery. With him was a man I recognized instantly, William Montgomery, Ethan's father. At 61, William was a tall, imposing man who carried himself with an air of absolute authority. He was the patriarch, the one who controlled everything. He gave me a curt, dismissive nod and didn't bother to stand up. He clearly saw this as a minor inconvenience. Victoria and Madison hadn't bothered to come. They must have thought their lawyer and the family patriarch could handle the little poor girl and whatever neighborhood lawyer she had scraped together. Amanda Chen walked in and owned the room. She didn't say hello. She didn't introduce herself. She walked straight to the head of the conference table, placed her designer briefcase down, and snapped it open. Richard started to speak. "Miss Chen, I presume." As I explained to Miss Mitchell, "This is a very standard." Amanda held up a hand, and he instantly fell silent. "Save it, Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room. She pulled out a single laminated sheet of paper and slid it across the table to William. It was a notarized financial statement. 16,340,000, Amanda announced, her voice precise. "That is the current post-tax liquid net worth of my client, Miss Zara Mitchell, as of 9 o'clock a.m. this morning." You could have heard a pin drop. Richard Sterling's face went white. He looked like he was going to vomit right there on the conference table. William Montgomery, the man who oozed arrogance, actually recoiled. His eyes darted from the paper to me, and his jaw went slack. He pushed his chair back from the table, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face. What is this?" he stammered, pointing at the paper. That app, that's yours." I looked him dead in the eye. "It is," I said. "I co-founded it 7 years ago." I couldn't help but remember a conversation just last month. Ethan and I were supposed to go to dinner, and I had to cancel because we were in the middle of final negotiations. He had sighed, frustrated. "Babe, are you still messing around with that little blog thing? You're wasting your time on that hobby. You should be planning our life." "A hobby? My $16 million hobby?" Amanda didn't give them time to recover. She pulled out a new, thick document, our revised addendum, and slid it over to Richard. "And this," she said, "is our addendum to your creative writing project." Richard fumbled for it, his hands shaking. "It completely replaces your draft," Amanda continued. "We expect it to be signed, notarized, and returned to my office by 5 o'clock p.m. today, or the wedding is as you so delicately put it off. And believe me, Miss Mitchell will be the one walking away." William grabbed the document from Richard. He started to read, his face turning from pale white to a deep, blotchy red. "What is this? This is absurd," he sputtered. "Is it?" Amanda asked, leaning forward. "Let me summarize the key points for you, so there's no confusion. Clause 1. The entire $16.3 million estate of Miss Mitchell, plus any and all future earnings, stock options, real estate, and intellectual property derived from her businesses are her sole and separate property, now and forever untouchable by Mr. Montgomery or the Montgomery family estate, in the event of separation or divorce." She held up a finger. Clause 2. Any and all debts, liens, or financial encumbrances belonging to Montgomery Properties Group or to any Montgomery family member individually, incurred before or during the marriage, shall remain their sole responsibility. My client will be legally shielded from any and all liability. You default on a loan? Your creditors cannot come within a mile of her money. William looked like he was about to have a stroke. You can't owe. I'm just getting started," Amanda said, her voice turning to steel. Clause 3. We'll call this the Victoria and Madison clause, though it applies to everyone. It's a penalty clause. Should this marriage end as a direct result of proven infidelity by Mr. Ethan Montgomery, or proven emotional, financial, or physical abuse or duress from any member of the Montgomery family, including but not limited to his parents or siblings, Ms. Zara Mitchell will be entitled to a one-time punitive payment of $5.5 million. to be paid directly from Mr. William Montgomery's personal trust fund. The room exploded. 5.5 million. William roared, slamming his fist on the table. This is extortion. This is insane. Richard Sterling just sat there sweating, completely neutered. He knew exactly how ironclad Amanda's drafting was. He was utterly outmatched, and he knew it. This wasn't a first-year law student's markup. This was a corporate execution. Richard looked like he was choking. He sputtered. This is extortion. It's blackmail. William Montgomery shot to his feet, his face a furious shade of purple. He pointed a shaking finger at me, but his words were for Amanda. Who in the hell do you think you are? You can't come in here. Amanda stood up slowly, a picture of calm, lethal power. She looked at Richard, her eyes cold. Who am I? I am the legal counsel for a woman who is currently, as of this morning, wealthier than your entire near-bankrupt law firm. Richard shrank back in his chair as if she had slapped him. Then she turned her gaze to William Montgomery. He was a big man, but he seemed to shrink. And as for you, Mr. Montgomery, she continued, her voice cutting, my client is significantly more solvent than your entire debt-ridden properties group. So, I suggest you sit down, and we can stop pretending this is about anything other than your desperation. William was breathing hard, but he sat. He knew he was trapped. You see, Amanda said, walking slowly along the side of the table. I had my investigators do a little light reading last night. It's amazing what you can find in public records when you know where to look. She paused in front of Richard. Like, for instance, the $850,000 malpractice suit filed against you, Richard. Misappropriating client funds from a trust. That's not just a lawsuit. That's a career ender. You're looking at disbarment. You're ruined. Richard put his head in his hands. He didn't deny it. Amanda then turned back to William, who was watching her with a look of pure dread. And then there's Montgomery Properties Group, she said, her tone almost conversational. It looks so impressive from the outside, all those beautiful buildings. But it's rotten to the core. You're over $2.3 million in debt to your construction materials vendors alone. She ticked the points off on her fingers. You're 100 days past due to 4 major suppliers. You've taken out 3 high-interest bridge loans in the last 7 months, and the first one is due in 35 days. You're not just having a hard time, Mr. Montgomery. You are drowning. William was pale, his fury replaced by a sick, gray understanding. So, let's stop the charade, Amanda said, her voice sharp again. You didn't shove that insulting prenup in my client's face to protect the family. You did it because you're desperate. You were trying to trap your son. You were hoping to lock him into a marriage with a woman you thought was poor and powerless, a woman with no family to fight for her. She leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. You wanted to make sure that when your financial house of cards came crashing down, there was at least one asset your son's new, poor, unsuspecting wife that your creditors couldn't touch. You were hoping to shield what little you had left behind her. And this whole expensive wedding? It's just a show, isn't it? A big, fancy performance to convince your vendors and lenders that everything is fine, just long enough for you to secure another loan. Amanda straightened up. You weren't protecting your family. You were trying to find one last victim to feed to your creditors. The silence in the room was absolute. William Montgomery looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see arrogance. I saw pure, unadulterated fear. He finally understood. He wasn't in a negotiation. He was in an interrogation. He realized that it wasn't just his son's wedding on the line. It was his entire empire. If any of this information, this truth got out, his vendors would panic. His lenders would call in their loans, and he would be bankrupt by Monday. William Montgomery was breathing like a man who had just been punched in the gut. He was trembling, not with weakness, but with a deep, volcanic rage. His eyes, which had been darting between me and Amanda, finally settled on me. The fear was gone, replaced by pure hatred. You, he whispered, his voice shaking. You did this. You investigated us, my family. It was the first time I had spoken directly to him since I entered the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I met his furious gaze with a cold, steady calm that I didn't even know I possessed. "I'm just protecting myself, William," I said, my voice like steel. "The same way you thought you were protecting yourself." I gestured to the original insulting contract still sitting on the table. "You came at me with legal weapons, thinking I was unarmed. You were wrong." I picked up our addendum, the one Amanda had drafted. "You have 24 hours to sign this," I said. 5:00 p.m. today. Richard, finally finding his voice, croaked out. "Or what? You'll call off the wedding? That's what you've got. That's your only move." I almost smiled. He still didn't get it. He still thought this was about a wedding. I looked past him, back to William. He was the only one who mattered, or I said, letting the word hang in the air. "Not only will the wedding be canceled, which is now a certainty in my mind, but all this information." I tapped the financial report Amanda's team had prepared. All these loan defaults, the vendor debts, Richard's little malpractice suit, it's all public record. It's just no one has put it all together in one neat little package. I let that sink in. William's eyes widened. He knew what was coming. "I just wonder," I said, as if the thought had just occurred to me. "What would happen if the Boston Business Journal received an anonymous tip? A full package of documents outlining the, let's call them, creative business practices of Montgomery Properties Group? How long do you think it would take for your remaining credit lines to be frozen? How long before every vendor you have demands cash on delivery?" This was the final blow, the kill shot. Canceling the wedding would be humiliating. This would be financial annihilation. It would be the end of the Montgomery family name in Boston. William Montgomery stared at me, his chest heaving. He saw his entire legacy, his father's company, everything he had built his arrogant life upon, crumbling to dust. And he saw that I was the one holding the match. He knew in that instant that I wasn't bluffing. He knew I would do it. He had pushed me, and I was pushing back with the force of a wrecking ball. He sat there for a long, agonizing minute. The only sound was Richard Sterling's shallow breathing. Finally, William Montgomery, the great patriarch, slumped in his chair. He looked old and small and utterly defeated. He didn't look at me again. He just looked at his useless, sweating lawyer. His voice was a dead, empty rasp. "Sign it, Richard. Just sign it." That night, the Montgomery mansion must have felt like a tomb. Amanda and I had walked away with their signed surrender. Richard and William had to drive back to Beacon Hill, their tails between their legs, to deliver the news to the two women they had left behind. The two women who were, without a doubt, expecting to celebrate a victory. I can picture the scene perfectly. Victoria and Madison waiting in the opulent family room, glasses of expensive wine in their hands. They probably looked up, smiling, when William and Richard walked in. "Well?" Victoria would have asked, her voice light. "Is it done? Did the little fool sign?" William would have just stared, his face gray and empty. He would have walked past them to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his hands shaking. Richard, the weasel, would have been unable to meet their eyes. "What is it?" Madison would have demanded, her voice rising. "Richard, what happened? What did you do?" Richard would have flinched. She didn't sign the original." "What do you mean she didn't sign?" Victoria would have snapped, her patience gone. "William, what is he talking about?" William would have taken a long drink of his whiskey before speaking. "She had a lawyer." "A lawyer?" Madison would have laughed. "What, some public defender?" "Richard, you said she had Amanda Chen." Richard would have whispered, and the name would have hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Victoria's smile would have vanished. Madison's face would have paled. "They knew that name. And that's not all," William would have said, his voice a dead rasp. "She knows. She knows everything. The business, the loans, Richard's lawsuit." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. And then the explosion. It would have come from Victoria. A sound of pure, primal rage. That I can hear the venom in her voice. That dirty, scheming little a crystal glass would have shattered against the marble fireplace. She dared. She dared to investigate my family, to dig into our lives. Victoria would have been pacing like a caged panther. I knew it. I knew there was something off about her from the very beginning. She was too quiet, too observant. She was always watching. I'm sure her mind, just like mine, flashed back to a specific moment, a dinner party last year with some of their most important friends. Victoria had been holding court, describing the pedigree of an expensive French Bordeaux she was serving. She had offered me a glass, a gesture she clearly intended as a test. I had smiled politely. No. Thank you, Victoria. I actually prefer a Malbec, if you have one. Her face had tightened, almost imperceptibly. To her, it wasn't a preference. It was a rejection. It was an insult. A girl like me was supposed to be grateful for whatever scrap she was offered, not have opinions. She was sizing us up, Vanessa would have shrieked, back in the present. She was disrespecting me in my own home all this time, pretending to be this simple, naive computer artist, driving that beige little car, and she was sitting on $16 million. The sheer deceit of it would have been what enraged her the most. That she, Victoria Montgomery, had been fooled. Madison, panicked, would have turned on the weakest link, her husband. You, she would have screamed at Richard, her voice a shrill siren. It's just a formality, you said. I'll handle the little girl, you said. She would have been right in his face. You let her walk all over you. And now what? Now we have to listen to her? We have to sign that thing, that clause giving her $5.5 million of my father's money if we upset her. You are pathetic. Richard, a man who had just watched his entire career and reputation go up in flames that afternoon, would have had nothing left to lose. My fault. He would have spat back, his voice cracking. My fault? I'm not the one who spent $60,000 on shoes at Neiman Marcus last month while we are bouncing checks to the construction company. How dare you? Madison would have shrieked. Don't talk to me about money. At least my bad investments were with my own money. I didn't gamble away half of my wife's inheritance on some sham cryptocurrency fund a tennis instructor told you about. The fight would have escalated, a flurry of accusations and insults, the ugly, rotten core of their family finally exposed. Madison might have even slapped him. It would have devolved into chaos until one word from Victoria cut through the noise. Silence. Her voice would have been like a whip. They both would have frozen, breathing hard. Victoria would have been standing by the fireplace, cold and terrifying in her rage. Stop it, both of you, sniveling like children. This is not over. She would have looked at her husband. William, did you sign it? William, defeated, would have nodded. I had to. Amanda Chen had the documents, the proof. She would have sent it to the Journal by morning. She would have ruined us. Good, Victoria would have said. Madison and Richard would have stared at her. Good. Madison would have whispered, Mother, are you insane? She won. She beat us. She has us in a cage. She thinks she won, Victoria would have said, her voice dropping to a low, cold, calculating tone. She thinks she's so smart, but she's made a mistake. What is the one thing we need to happen, no matter what? Richard, his legal mind slowly starting to churn again, would have answered, the wedding. We need the wedding to happen to show stability, to keep the creditors from panicking. Exactly, Victoria would have said. We need the appearance of a happy, stable, growing family. We need the positive press from the wedding. She would have looked at her family, her eyes glittering. So, this is what we do. We smile. We go to the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. We welcome our dear Zara into the family with open arms. We will be the most loving in-laws she could ever dream of. I won't, Madison would have spat. I will not pretend to like that. You will, Victoria would have hissed. You will smile until your face aches. You will give a toast. You will hug her because we need this wedding to happen. We need the breathing room it buys us. William would have looked up, a tiny spark of hope in his dead eyes. And then what, Victoria? After the wedding, we're still trapped. That addendum, she owns us. A slow, terrible smile would have spread across Victoria's face. And then, after she is legally and officially Mrs. Ethan Montgomery, we find a way to handle her. Richard would have perked up, seeing the angle. What do you mean? She will pay for this, Victoria would have said, her voice soft and deadly. She will pay for humiliating this family. Richard, contracts can be broken, can't they? Especially a contract that was signed under duress. Richard's own smile would have returned a thin, reptilian grin. Yes, they can. A contract signed under the threat of coercion or blackmail, and she threatened us, Victoria would have declared, her voice rising in triumph. She threatened to leak our private financial information to the press. That is the very definition of coercion. That is blackmail. Madison would have finally understood. So, we let the wedding happen, and then we sue her. We sue her to have the addendum nullified. We do more than that, Victoria would have said. We play the long game. She wants to be a Montgomery? Fine. She will learn what that means. We find dirt on her. This Lumen a company nobody makes $16 million cleanly. We find something. We find an angry partner. We find a misstep. We use that fault clause against her. We prove she was the one who was deceptive. We ruin her. William would have nodded, the color returning to his face. Yes, we play the long game. Victoria would have walked to the bar and poured herself a fresh glass of wine. She thinks she's smart. She thinks she's won. She would have taken a sip. But she's just a girl. She has just declared war on the wrong family. Tomorrow night at the rehearsal dinner, we will be perfect. We will be the loving, welcoming Montgomery family, and Zara Mitchell will walk right into the trap. I was in my loft, but I was not at peace. I was pacing, my heels, silent on the expensive rug. The victory from that afternoon, the sight of William Montgomery and Richard Sterling, utterly defeated, felt cold. It was a business win, clean and brutal. But what was coming next was not business. It was my life. I had called Ethan an hour ago, right after I left Amanda. I had to tell him about the money. I had to tell him what his family had done and what I had done in response. I owed him that. At least I thought I did. His reaction on the phone was unsettling. At first, there was just stunned silence. 16 million. You Zara, his voice was a high, disbelieving squeak. I explained quickly, cleanly. The Lumina buyout. The 7 years of silent work. And when I finished, he had made a strange, breathless sound. It was not. Congratulations, babe. That's incredible. It was not. I'm so proud of you. No. It was a sound of relief, a deep, shuddering exhale. As if a man who thought he was about to be shot had just been told the gun was not loaded. Oh, my God, Zara, he'd whispered. This changes everything. Those words had bothered me more than his family's open hostility. Changes everything. How? For whom? He said he was coming right over. And now I was waiting. I knew in my gut this was the real test. The battle with William was just a skirmish. This with Ethan was the war. This was the one that mattered. I heard the private elevator ding. The sound of the doors sliding open into my foyer. I steeled myself. He burst in. But he was not apologetic. He was not ashamed. He was ecstatic. His face was split in a massive grin, his eyes bright. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery, like all his problems had been solved in an instant. Zara, baby, he shouted. You won't believe it. He rushed toward me, his arms open, trying to grab me, to lift me up, to spin me around in a movie-style embrace. I did not move. I let him hug me. But I was a statue. My arms stayed at my sides. I was rigid, cold. He was so wrapped up in his own joy that he didn't even notice. He pulled back, still holding my upper arms, his face beaming, looking at me like I was a miracle. Dad called me just now, on my way over. He called me from the car. It's all sorted out, baby. It's done. I just stared at him. Sorted out? Yes, he said, laughing. He signed the papers your lawyers had thingy, the addendum, all of it. He agreed to everything. He signed it all. He shook me gently, as if trying to shake me into his state of happiness. See, Zara, I told you. I told you they would come around. I knew they would understand. We're still getting married. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. The words just hung there in my beautiful living room, with the entire Boston skyline glittering behind him. I searched his face. I looked for one single ounce of shame for what his family had done. I looked for a flicker of anger on my behalf. I looked for an apology. A simple, Zara, I am so sorry they put you through that. There was nothing. Just this frantic, desperate, overwhelming relief. It was the relief of a man who had just narrowly avoided a personal inconvenience. Not the man whose fiancé had just been systematically humiliated and threatened by his own blood. My voice came out so quiet it was almost a whisper. Everything is fine, Ethan. His smile wavered just a little. He finally sensed the ice. Yeah, of course. They signed, didn't they? You won. You got what you wanted, right? What I wanted, I repeated, and my voice was dangerously low. I pulled his hands off my arms. What I wanted, Ethan, was a fiancé who would have heard what his mother said and told her to go to hell right there in that library. What I wanted was the man I was supposed to marry to have a spine. Zara, babe, come on, he pleaded, his happy mask crumbling, replaced by that familiar weak, cornered look. Don't be like that. It's over now. We can move on. No, I said, taking a step back. It's not over. This is the test, not the meeting with your father. This right now, you and me. I crossed my arms. Did you ask him? Did you ask your father why he suddenly agreed to my terms after threatening to cancel the wedding? Ethan shuffled his feet. He looked away, toward the windows. He said you two had a productive meeting. He was clearly parroting a lie he'd been fed. He said your lawyer was very thorough. He said he respects your business acumen. I let out a single, sharp laugh. My business acumen. Is that what he's calling it now? He didn't mention why he was so willing to sign. He didn't mention that Montgomery Properties Group is a house of cards? That he is over $2.3 million in debt to his vendors? That your sister's husband, Richard, is about to be disbarred for stealing from his clients? Ethan's face went from pale to a sickly green. What? No, what are you talking about? He shook his head like he could physically block the information. That's just business stuff, Zara. That's family business. It's private. It became my business. I snapped, my voice finally rising. The second your family tried to make me their legal shield. It became my business when they tried to trap me into a contract that would make me responsible for their debts. It became my business when your mother, your sister, and your brother-in-law ambushed me and demanded I sign a document that said I would have to pay them back for the ring you put on my finger. I didn't know about that part, Zara. I swear, he said, his eyes wide and panicked. That's crazy. That's the problem, Ethan. I finally yelled, the force of my anger and disappointment breaking through. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You let them handle me, while you were off at the country club handling men's business. Did you ever, for 1 second, stop and ask what they were doing to me? Do you know what they called me while you were gone? Do you have any idea the names your mother and your sister called me to my face in your father's house? He just stood there, silent. He looked at the floor. He looked at his expensive shoes. He looked anywhere but at me. He had no answer. They called me a gold digger, Ethan. They called me a dirty, scheming. I paused, my voice shaking. They treated me like I was trash. They were scraping off their shoe. They threatened to destroy me 3 days before our wedding. My family is flying in tomorrow. I was breathing hard, the words pouring out of me. And you knew. You knew they were planning something. You told me they just wanted a guarantee. You knew what they thought of me, and you did nothing. You said nothing. He finally looked up, and his eyes were full of tears. But they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration. Tears of a man being put in an uncomfortable position. Zara, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Please don't do this. It's family. It's complicated. You know how they are. It's just the way they are. The way they are. I repeated, my voice now completely flat. All the anger was gone, replaced by a cold, terrible clarity. I didn't want to get in the middle of it, he cried, and the admission hung in the air. I hate it. I hate it when you and my mom fight. I just wanted it to be over. The important thing is that we love each other, right? That's all that matters. Don't let this money stuff come between us. Money. That word again. I laughed. It was a bitter, sharp, ugly sound that startled both of us. Money? I said, my voice dripping with a scorn I did not know I possessed. You think I'm the one letting money come between us? I walked right up to him, so close he had to look at me. They started this, Ethan. They fired the first shot. They launched this entire disgusting war with money. They tried to humiliate me, to enslave me, because they thought I had no money. I poked him in the chest, hard. And the only reason you are standing in my apartment right now, happy and relieved, is because you found out that I do. Your relief when I told you on the phone? It wasn't for me. It wasn't. Congratulations, Zara. It was. Oh, thank God. You were relieved because you realized my money, my $16 million, could save your family. You weren't worried about me. You were worried about them. He opened his mouth, a pathetic, gasping motion. But no words came out. He could not deny it, because it was the truth. And in that second, the last bit of love I had for him, the last hope for our future, it all just evaporated. It turned to dust and blew away. I was not looking at my fiancé. I was looking at a coward. He was not just weak. He was complicit. He had been standing on the sidelines silently while his family tried to destroy me. He knew exactly who they were. And he had made his choice. He would always choose them. He would always choose the path of least resistance. He would always be willing to let me be the sacrifice, just as long as his own life remained comfortable. My face hardened. The woman who had been shaking in the Montgomery Library yesterday was gone. The woman who had just cried out in anger was gone too. All that was left was cold, hard pity. Get out, Ethan, I said. My voice was devoid of all emotion. He blinked as if he'd been slapped. What? Baby, no. Come on. We're fine. They signed the papers. It's over. I said, get out. I walked past him to the private elevator entrance in my foyer and hit the call button. He lunged after me, his voice pitching high with real panic. Zara, stop. Stop it. You can't do this. We're getting married. What about the rehearsal dinner? It's tomorrow night. My parents are expecting us. All our friends, your family is coming tomorrow. The elevator door slid open with a soft, metallic sigh, revealing the empty car. I looked at him, my eyes as cold and dead as my heart felt. I need to think, I said. Zara, no please, he begged, grabbing for my arm. I snatched it away. I grabbed his arm and shoved him forward, hard, into the elevator. I said I need to think. He stumbled into the car. I hit the lobby button on the outside panel. He turned, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. Zara? He screamed as the doors began to close. I did not say another word. I just watched his face disappear. The doors sealed with a quiet thud. I stood there for a second in the total silence. Then I turned, walked to the solid steel door of my own home, and slammed it shut. The heavy final sound echoed in the empty, silent loft. The next night was the rehearsal dinner. It was held at Harborview, the Montgomery family's flagship restaurant in downtown Boston. It was the kind of place that whispered wealth dim, strategic lighting, heavy silverware, and floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. The room was packed. All of Ethan's important friends were their partners from his father's company, local politicians. And in the middle of it all, at a table near the front, sat my family, my mother, Diana, my father, Robert, and my younger sister, Maya. They had driven in from South Carolina that afternoon. They are good, honest, middle-class people. My father is a retired high school principal, and my mother is a nurse. They looked so proud, so happy, and so completely out of place in this den of vipers. My mom was wearing her best dress, and I could see the pure, unadulterated joy in her eyes. She thought I was living a fairy tale. That was perhaps the cruelest part of all. Ethan was glued to my side. He was playing the role of the loving, doting fiancé perfectly. His hand was constantly on the small of my back. His smile was bright, but I could feel the clammy sweat on his palm. He was terrified. He was not terrified for me. He was terrified of me, and of his family, and of what would happen if this whole fragile performance shattered. And it was a performance, a magnificent, terrifying performance. The Montgomery family Victoria, William, Madison, and Richard were masters of deception. They were all there, dressed to the nines, radiating charm and warmth. Diana, Robert, Victoria cried out the moment she saw my parents. She glided over, her arms opened, her smile looking genuine to anyone who did not know her. "We are just so thrilled to finally meet you. Your daughter is a treasure." And then she did it. She turned to me, right in front of my beaming, unsuspecting mother, and pulled me into a tight, cold, reptilian hug. Her nails dug slightly into my arm as she whispered in my ear, "Play your part, little girl." Then she pulled back, her smile wide, for my mother. "We just love her so much." My mom, bless her heart, put her hand over her chest. "Oh, Victoria, that means so much. We're just so happy for them." The entire dinner was like that, a suffocating, poisonous fog of fake friendliness. Richard Sterling, who looked like he had not slept in days, actually came over to shake my father's hand. Madison complimented my sister's dress. The highlight, though, was William. After the main course, he stood, tapping his champagne glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. He looked every bit the proud patriarch. "Good evening, everyone." "Good evening," he beamed, his eyes crinkling. He looked right at me, and then at my parents. "You know, when a son gets married," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion, "a father worries. You worry if he's found the right person, someone with character, with strength, someone who will be a partner." He raised his glass to me. "And then Zara came into our lives. We have watched her, and we have been so impressed. She is, as many of you now know, a brilliant, successful, and incredibly intelligent young woman. A true rising star in her own right." My parents were glowing, my mother practically in tears. "We could not be more proud," William continued. "And we are not just gaining a daughter, we are gaining a whole wonderful family." He smiled at my parents. "Diana, Robert, welcome to the Montgomery family." The room erupted in applause. My family, my sweet, naive family, was applauding the loudest. My stomach turned. I just wanted to get out of there. As William spoke, I zoned out, his voice fading. I remembered standing in the kitchen of their mansion 6 months ago, waiting for Ethan. I'd overheard William talking to him in the study. His voice had been sharp, dismissive. "Son, I'm not saying she isn't nice," he'd said. "But your taste, a man of your standing needs a woman who reflects that standing. This little designer, it's a phase. You need to improve your standards." To Zara and Ethan, William boomed, snapping me back to the present. I raised my glass, my smile a perfect empty mask. I endured it for another hour. The fakeness was so thick I could barely breathe. Finally, I leaned over to Ethan. "I'm just going to use the restroom." I stood up, smiling at my mother. "I'll be right back, Mom." I was halfway across the dining room when I felt a hand grip my elbow, hard. "Oh, Zara, darling, let me show you where it is," Madison's voice sang out. Her smile was plastered on, bright and fake for the room to see. She did not steer me toward the elegant public restrooms. Instead, she guided me, her grip like a vice, down a narrow, carpeted hallway toward the kitchen entrance and the staff bathrooms. The moment we rounded the corner, out of sight of the dining room, her entire face changed. I was expecting it. I had been waiting for it all night. My right hand was already in my clutch purse. My thumb found the small button on the side of my phone. I pressed it twice. The screen stayed dark, but I knew the microphone was now live. The voice recorder app was running. Madison's smile did not just fade, it vanished. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unfiltered venom. She shoved me hard against the wall, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my shoulder. "Listen to me, you little bitch," she hissed, her voice a low, vicious snarl, completely different from the sweet tone she'd used seconds before. "You think you won, don't you?" She spat, her face inches from mine. "You think you're so smart, walking into my father's office with your high-priced lawyer, threatening him? You think that dirty $16 million impresses me?" She laughed, a short, ugly sound. "We've seen money like that come and go. It doesn't make you one of us. It just makes you a target. You will never be a Montgomery," she continued, her voice dropping even lower. "You are just the help. You are the help who got lucky. You're a dressed-up gold digger from the backwoods, and that is all you will ever be. You're nothing." I just looked at her, my face blank, letting her dig her own grave. "So you enjoy this little party?" she sneered. "Enjoy the flowers. Enjoy wearing your little white dress tomorrow, because my mother and we are not going to let you get away with this. You will regret the day you ever crossed us. You will pay for humiliating my family, Zara. I promise you that." I walked back to the table, my heart beating a low, steady drum of pure, cold adrenaline. The audio file was safe. Madison's vile, toxic words were captured. She had no idea what she had just done. She thought she was threatening me. What she had really done was hand me the executioner's axe. I sat down, and the warmth of the room felt sickening. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses was a grotesque soundtrack to the lie I was living. Ethan immediately reached for my hand and squeezed it. His own hand was still damp with nervous sweat. "You were gone a while," he whispered, forcing a smile. "See?" He gestured around the room at my parents laughing with his aunt, at his father talking to a politician, at Madison, who was now back at her seat, smiling sweetly, as if she hadn't just threatened to destroy me. "See, babe?" Ethan said again, his voice full of that desperate, pathetic relief. "Everything is fine. It's all working out. Everything is fine." I looked at his hand holding mine. I looked up at his handsome, weak face, the face of the man I had loved, the man I had defended to my friends, the man who had been relieved to find out I was rich, not proud, the man who was so terrified of his family that he would happily watch them eat me alive, just as long as he did not have to get in the middle of it. He was a coward, a beautiful, charming, spineless coward. Then I looked at them. Victoria, watching me with a tight, calculating smile. William, the patriarch, performing for the room, pretending he hadn't been forced to sign his own surrender that very morning. And Madison, she caught my eye from across the table, and her sweet smile became a tiny, sharp, venomous sneer. Just for a second, a silent promise of the war to come, and in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The final, stupid, lingering piece of hope in my heart died. I did not just have to survive these people. I had to escape them. I realized, with the clarity of a bell ringing in a silent church, that you do not just marry a person. You marry their family. You marry their debts, their lies, their toxicity, their secrets. If I walked down that aisle tomorrow, I was not just marrying Ethan. I was marrying them. I was shackling myself to this nest of vipers for the rest of my life. I was signing up for a lifetime of looking over my shoulder, of fighting these silent, vicious battles, of being tied to their sinking, desperate ship. And for what? For Ethan? For a man who would not, and could not ever stand up for me. I would rather be alone. I would rather be single and free and in control of my own life than be Mrs. Zara Montgomery and be trapped in this beautiful, expensive, poison-filled prison. The addendum Amanda and I had drafted was a shield. It was Plan A. Madison's little performance in the hallway had just activated Plan B. Plan B was not defense. Plan B was liberation. I smiled back at Ethan. "You're right, babe," I said sweetly, patting his hand. "Everything is perfect." Under the table, hidden by the thick white linen, I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I stopped the audio recording and saved the file. Madison's voice, full of hate. "You are the help. I promise you will regret this." I opened my secure messaging app to Amanda Chen. I attached the audio file. My message was short. Plan B is a go. The sister just gave us all the proof of duress we'll ever need. Get the team ready for tomorrow. I hit send. I could almost feel Amanda's sharp, wolfish grin through the phone. Then I opened another app, a different secure chat. This one was to Marcus Cole, the brilliant, ruthless chief financial officer I had just hired to run my new venture fund, Lumina Capital. My message to him was even shorter. It was the nuclear option, the sixth weapon, the one I had prepped with Amanda's investigators just in case. My thumbs moved quickly. Marcus, it's time. Execute the debt acquisition. I want us to be the primary lien holder for Montgomery Properties by morning. All of it. The vendor debt. The bridge loans. Buy it all. Now. I hit send. A small check mark appeared. It was done. The mechanism was in motion. By the time William Montgomery woke up tomorrow, he would not just be a man I had blackmailed. He would be a man who owed me millions of dollars. I slipped my phone back into my purse. I felt a strange, light, incredible calm wash over me. The decision was made. The war was already won. They just did not know it yet. I picked up my champagne flute, and I stood up. The chatter at our table stopped. Ethan looked up at me, his smile wavering, replaced by confusion. Zara, babe, what are you doing? My movement caught the attention of the tables nearby. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with conversation, slowly quieted. One by one, people turned to look. Victoria and William looked up, their smiles tight and instantly wary. They knew I was not on the program. I'd just like to say a few words, I said. My voice, clear and strong, carrying easily through the now silent room. I raised my glass, looking directly at the head of the table. I smiled, a real smile this time, bright and sharp. I want to thank the entire Montgomery family. I made eye contact with each of them, William, Victoria, Richard, and finally Madison, who looked suddenly, deeply uneasy. Thank you, I continued, for clarifying so much for me these past few days. You have truly and completely opened my eyes. I will never forget the hospitality you have all shown me. I let the words hang in the air. The confusion in the room was delicious. My parents looked proud. The Montgomery family looked like they had just swallowed poison. I'll see you all tomorrow, I said, my smile widening. At the wedding. It's going to be a day that none of us will ever forget. I took a long, slow sip of my champagne, held their terrified gazes for 1 second longer, and then sat back down, leaving them all in a state of stunned, agonizing silence. The hook was set. The trap was sprung. All they could do now was wait for the morning, the wedding day. It was exactly the spectacle you would expect from the Montgomery family. The ceremony was set in the gardens of the Fairmont Estate, a historic, opulent Boston mansion that screamed old money. Victoria, in a desperate attempt to project wealth they did not have, had spent over $340,000 on flowers alone. White roses, peonies, and orchids dripped from every archway. 300 guests, a mix of Boston's elite, their business creditors, and my own sweet, unsuspecting family were seated in rows of white chairs. I was not in a dressing room. I was in a car parked a block away, watching a live video feed from a videographer Amanda had hired. I watched the guests file in. I saw my mother, Diana, dab her eyes, filled with so much pride. My father looked nervous and happy, shaking hands with people he did not know. They were seated in the second row, a place of honor, a final cruel manipulation by Victoria. And then I saw them in the front row, Victoria, William, Madison, and Richard. They were the picture of proud, dignified hosts. But I could see it. I could see the look they exchanged. It was a look of smug, self-satisfied triumph. Their performance at the rehearsal dinner, William's fake, humble speech, Victoria's cold embrace, Madison's private, vicious threats, it was all part of their plan. They genuinely believed they had won. They thought their threats had worked. They thought I was so terrified of them, so desperate to marry into their family, that I would sign their addendum and then just show up. They believed I was now trapped, that I would walk down that aisle, and that after the I do, their real plan to nullify the contract and destroy me could begin. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was beaten to the altar. My feed focused on Ethan. He looked handsome. He also looked like a man about to throw up. He was pale, nervously adjusting his tuxedo, but he was smiling. He was smiling at his father. It was that same pathetic look of relief I had seen in my apartment. He had done it. He had weathered the storm, avoided all conflict, and his prize was here. He was getting his show, his wife, and he hoped his family's financial salvation, all in one package. The string quartet, hired at an absurd expense, began to swell. They were playing the processional. Every head in the garden turned, all 300 guests looking back toward the grand stone staircase I was supposed to descend. Ethan's nervous smile widened. He looked up, his eyes bright, ready to see his bride. The music hit its peak. The wedding coordinator, a woman with a headset, gave a signal. The large oak doors of the mansion, high at the top of the stairs, slowly began to swing open. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, but it was not me. I was a mile away in a town car, watching it all on a screen. The trap was set, and the show was just beginning. The string music swelled to its grand crescendo, then hung in the air. The heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase opened, but it was not me in a white dress. It was Amanda Chen. She was a vision of fire and ice, a direct, glorious contrast to the sea of pale roses and white chairs. She was wearing a stunning, custom-tailored power suit in the brightest, most unapologetic shade of crimson. Her high heels clicked with sharp, lethal purpose on the stone steps as she began her descent. The music faltered, the string quartet losing their place, the notes dying in confusion. The wedding coordinator, her face a mask of panic, ran to the bottom of the stairs, headset flapping. Ma'am, you can't be here." Amanda did not even look at her. She walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture, her eyes fixed forward. She strode onto the altar, took the small microphone from the stunned officiant's hand, and turned to face the 300 silent, confused guests. Ethan stumbled forward, his hands outstretched. "Zara, what is this? Who are you?" Amanda looked at him, her expression one of mild distaste. She tapped the microphone. A soft thump echoed through the garden. "My apologies for the interruption." Amanda's voice boomed, crisp and clear over the expensive sound system. "There will be no wedding today." A collective, echoing gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan's face crumpled in confusion and terror. "What? No, what are you talking about?" Victoria Montgomery shot to her feet, her face a mask of pure, murderous rage. "What is the meaning of this? Who let this woman in here?" "Security," she shrieked, pointing at Amanda. "Get her out of here now." Two uniformed security guards, hired for the event, started to move forward from the sides of the garden. Amanda simply held up one hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said calmly into the mic. Then she nodded. She nodded to the AV booth at the back of the garden, a booth that was now being operated by her associate, not the wedding DJ. A loud, piercing electronic click crackled over the speakers, silencing Victoria's screams. And then there was a voice. Madison's voice. "My recording from the hallway last night, now amplified for 300 people to hear. Listen to me. You little bitch," the voice sneered. Echoing off the historic walls of the estate, the entire crowd froze. "You think you won, don't you? You think you're so smart. You think that dirty $16 million impresses me? You will never be a Montgomery. You are just the help. You are the help who got lucky. You're a dressed-up gold digger from the backwoods, and that is all you will ever be. You're nothing." It was dead silent. You could hear the wind rustling the leaves. Every single guest, every friend, every business associate had turned in their seats to stare at the front row, to stare at Madison. Her face was not just pale. It was a waxy, greenish-white, the color of death. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open in a silent, paralyzed scream. She looked like she had turned to stone. The recording continued, Madison's voice dripping with venom. My mother and we are not going to let you get away with this. You will regret the day you ever crossed us. You will pay for humiliating my family, Zara. I promise you that." The audio cut off. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any sound. It was broken by a single, sharp sob. My mother. I watched on my screen as my father, his face a mask of pure protective rage I had never seen before, stood up. He put his arm around my mother and helped her to her feet. His eyes locked on the front row on the Montgomery family with a look of such profound disgust that it made my heart ache. Across the aisle, Richard Sterling Madison's useless husband made a sick, wet, groaning sound. He slumped sideways in his chair, his eyes rolling back, and collapsed in a dead faint on the grass. Madison did not even notice. She was still frozen, a living statue of her own hatred. Amanda Chen let the scene hang for a full 10 seconds. She let them sit in the poison their own daughter had created. Then she spoke again. "The wedding is, of course, canceled," she said, her voice matter of fact. "Due to a sustained campaign of deceit, emotional abuse, threats, and a clear attempt to have my client sign a legal document under extreme duress." She held up a copy of the addendum they had signed. "This document, the addendum to the prenup, which the Montgomery family signed yesterday under threat of their exposure, is now null and void. Their own actions, as you have just heard, have proven the duress clause they were planning to use against my client. They have, in effect, nullified their own agreement." She paused, and a small, sharp smile touched her lips. "But that is just the family matter." William Montgomery, who had been sitting in stunned, apoplectic silence, finally found his voice. "That's enough," he roared, lurching to his feet, his face a terrifying shade of purple. "Get out, all of you, get out." "I am not finished, Mr. Montgomery," Amanda said, her voice cutting through his overriding him. "I'm moving on to the business matter." This quieted him. The guests murmured. "It has come to our attention," Amanda continued, "that Montgomery Properties Group, the company paying for this lovely event, is in severe financial distress, to the tune of over $2.5 million in past due vendor debts and high-interest bridge loans." The gasps this time were from the other side of the aisle. The business associates, the creditors, the lenders. William looked like he had been shot. "My client, Miss Zara Mitchell," Amanda announced, "believes in smart investments. So, as of PM last night, acting as the founder and primary stakeholder of her new investment firm, Lumina Capital." Amanda paused and nodded to the AV booth again. The massive, elegant white screens on either side of the altar, the ones that were supposed to be showing a romantic slideshow of me and Ethan, flickered to life. They did not show our faces. They showed a series of legal documents, bank transfers, and at the bottom, an assignment of debt ledger. "My client," Amanda's voice boomed, "has acquired that entire $2.5 million debt portfolio. All of it." The screen zoomed in on the signature line. "New lien holder, Lumina Capital LLC." Amanda smiled a wide, bright, terrifying smile. "In simple terms for everyone here, Miss Zara Mitchell is now the largest primary and sole creditor for Montgomery Properties Group. She owns your debt." William. Victoria Montgomery made a sound like a dying animal, and fell, not fainted, but fell bonelessly back into her chair, her ridiculous hat covering her face. William clutched his chest, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out, and Amanda added, as the final, beautiful kill shot, "As the new lien holder, we've reviewed your payment schedule, and it appears your first multi-million-dollar balloon payment was due 2 hours ago. We will be expecting that payment in full by PM today, or we will begin asset seizure proceedings on all Montgomery properties, including this one, immediately. Thank you for your time." She turned to Ethan. He was standing there in the middle of the aisle, his face completely crumpled. He was weeping, his body shaking. "Zara," he whispered, looking at the sky. "Zara, no, you can't, please." And that was my cue. From the side garden, a different aisle, I appeared. The guests all turned, another wave of gasps. I was not wearing a white dress. I was wearing a breathtaking emerald green silk jumpsuit. It was the color of money. It was the color of power. My hair was pulled back in a sleek, powerful ponytail. I looked and felt incredible. I walked straight past the front row. I did not look at the fainted Richard. I did not look at the paralyzed Madison. I did not look at the hyperventilating William or the collapsed Victoria. I walked right up to the altar, stopping a foot away from the man I was supposed to marry. He looked at me, his eyes red and begging. "Zara," he sobbed. "Why? Why are you doing this?" I looked at him not with hate, not even with anger, just with pity and with freedom. "You chose your family, Ethan," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "Now you can deal with the consequences with them." I turned, my back straight. I did not run. I walked. I walked past the shocked faces of his friends, past the stunned faces of his business partners. I walked past my parents, who were looking at me with a dawning, fierce, incredible pride. I walked down the long, flower-strewn aisle, all alone, back toward the Fairmont estate. I did not look back once. I just walked out into the bright Boston sunshine, leaving the entire burning, catastrophic mess for them to clean up. The fallout was immediate, and it was total. The wedding of the year became the scandal of the year. The Boston Business Journal did not just get an anonymous tip. They had a front row seat. Montgomery Properties Group, unable to pay me, and with every other creditor now demanding their money, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy the following week. It was not enough. As the primary secured lien holder, my fund Lumina Capital took control. We did not save the company. We liquidated it. We sold off the assets to recover our $2.5 million. The very first asset to go, the one I insisted on selling at auction myself, was their flagship restaurant, Harborview. I sold it and every one of its overpriced wine bottles to pay back the vendors. They had refused to pay for months. The news ripped through Boston. The Montgomery family was not just broke, they were a disgrace. Richard Sterling, already facing a malpractice suit, was summarily disbarred by the state of Massachusetts for his role in the fraudulent prenup and his theft of client funds. Madison, discovering her husband was now as penniless as he was useless, filed for divorce within a month. Ethan, with no family, no trust fund, and no skills his father had not paid for, lost everything. I heard he moved to a different state somewhere in the Midwest and was managing a chain restaurant. And William and Victoria, they lost their kingdom. The bank foreclosed on the Beacon Hill mansion. They lost their country club memberships. They lost their status. They were social poison. As for me, I had lost a wedding, but I had gained my life. I had already paid for that entire extravagant wedding myself. All those non-refundable deposits. I called the caterers, the florist, and the venue. I told them the wedding was off, but the party was on. That Saturday, instead of a wedding, I threw a survivor's party for my real family and my true friends. It was a celebration of freedom, truth, and new beginnings. My mother cried, but this time they were tears of pride. In the months that followed, Lumina Capital, my investment fund, officially launched. We became one of the most talked about new VC firms in the country, with a dedicated mission, funding and empowering businesses founded by Black women. We were not just investing, we were leveling the playing field. 6 months later, I was standing in my new office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the Boston skyline that I now had a stake in. I was prepping for a presentation. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from a new man in my life, a brilliant, kind architect who knew my whole story and called my strength my superpower. He was confirming our dinner plans. I smiled a real easy smile. I texted him back, then locked the phone and turned back to my presentation. I was happy. I was whole. And I was free. They wanted me to sign a document to prove I was worthless. In the end, they were the ones who had to sign bankruptcy papers because they forgot my true value. This story teaches that your self-worth is independent of how others perceive you. Especially when they are blinded by arrogance or desperation, people who underestimate you reveal their own limitations, not yours. True power comes from silently building your own success and having the courage to protect it. When someone, even a partner, proves they value their own comfort over your dignity, believe them. The greatest victory isn't just exposing their deceit. It's walking away to build a life of freedom and success, proving your value on your own terms, completely outside of their control. If you have ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated your worth, hit like and share your story in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to find their strength.